Hi, in this video, I like to talk about some AWS basics and AWS architecture. Okay, so let's start. So let's talk about AWS global architecture first. So AWS is a cloud vendor, and it is distributed it network all around the world. So generally, AWS consists of regions which are uh, which are distributed all over the world. For example, in Mumbai, in North Virginia, in um, uh, and in also um, Ohio. So these regions are like individual data centers. So all these regions are connected with each other with a backbone infrastructure. So, for example, so I say this is my Mumbai region, and this is my North Virginia, North Virginia, and North Virginia region. So we have different regions in AWS. So all these regions are connected with a backbone network. I mean through cables. So these cables run through oceans to connect each region. So that is why the AWS cloud network is very fast. Um and very trustworthy. I mean, very reliable. So so each region has again availability zones. So, for example, in Mumbai we have three availability zones. We can call them as AZ. We have three availability zones. Uh, so and each availability zones has given specific names like aged availability zone 1A, 1B, and 1C. Okay. So similarly, North Virginia has six availability zones. And again, between these availability zones, the communication is by default established. I mean, they can able to communicate with each other by default. So there is no need to do any configurations or cable connections like that things. So they will be able to communicate with each other by default. Uh, But as I said, even the Mumbai region and North Virginia region were connected through a dedicated wired system, which they call a backbone network. But they cannot establish the communication between Mumbai region and North Virginia region because they are they are like you know. That is not a communication they are intended to do. So because for example, if you connect from one application from one server in Mumbai region, one server in North Virginia region, so that type of connection can be established um, the, through the backbone network really fast. But if and for that one we have different types of settings. We can talk about that, but our aim is mainly understanding these regions. So simple, we have different regions in AWS. All are connected through a backbone network, which make AWS very robust and reliable. And each region has multiple availability zones. So each availability zones each availability zone acts as an individual data center. So for example, in Mumbai, we have three different availability zones. So each zone acts as an individual data centers, but they will be able to communicate with each other by default. So there need to be no ports opened or um, anything between these three availability zones. But whenever we are configuring the application level, so there are some settings we need to be do so that they will be able to communicate with each other. Uh, so and uh, that's it regarding the availability zones. We can talk about we can talk about them much deeper in our practical. So now our aim uh, is to create a for example, we need to create a server VPC. I mean, we need to create a machine here, virtual machine, and we need to create a virtual machine here, for example, and we need to connect from our putty, which is outside the network. This is AWS, for example. I can do an imaginary land here. So this is my AWS network. So we have different regions. Of course, I have mentioned only two. Uh, yeah, it's AWS network. Okay. So yeah. So we have our own network, maybe office or our own. For example, any network we have to connect to our servers through PuTTY, right? So from PuTTY, we need to connect to the instance or server which is in Mumbai region, one of the availability zone. So that how that can be established. So for this, we need to we need to configure some networking part so that our request can reach this particular server. So similarly, this is for middleware users like um, the admins, because only the admins usually connect to the server directly. But for the users, we need to make the application available. So there may be an application running on these servers. We have to open this application to the users all around the world. So here some users should also connect to the application. So this is entirely the middleware part we're gonna do. So we have to launch an application and open the ports so that the application is able to communicate to the outside world. um, so first we have to launch an EC2 instance in one of the availability zones in Mumbai, and then we have to connect it with PuTTY. Okay, so for that one, what is the network here? So let me talk about the network. I will open a new file. Okay, don't save. I don't want to save this one. Okay. So this is my Mumbai availability zone. For example, I took a Mumbai. Okay. We have three. Sorry, this is my region Mumbai, and we have three availability zones here. Let us take one for example. Um, this is my available AZ1, AZ1A, 1A. So this availability zone. So remember, an availability zone is a data center, individual data center. You can assume like that in AWS. So in the on-prem, whenever we need to connect to any data center, any server, so we need some configurations we need to do because it is not publicly accessible. So similarly, we need to configure the network in such a way it will allow our PuTTY request into the network. So so we will create a VPC first. This is my VPC. So virtual private cloud. So we can talk about it for 2 minutes. So what is a virtual private cloud? Generally in Mumbai data center, we have a number of vendors, like number of customers using the data center. For example, in the IRCTC maybe using the availability zones, and similarly Redbus also using the same availability zone. So but how can they differentiate their network from each other, right? So if someone is able to, someone who is working in Redbus is able to connect to the IRCTC website, IRCTC server, I mean, so it is not a good network, so it should not be allowed. So how the AWS gonna differentiate this kind of stuff? So assume like the people who the people or the customer uh, here is a red bus, so those people can access only their application, so they should not be allowed to connect to the networks of other customers. So what they do, they will create a virtual private cloud first. So that virtual private cloud can be distributed between multiple availability zones, like uh, oh, so I will open a new window. Uh, uh, okay, let's save it. Okay, so for example, this is my Mumbai region, and we have three availability zones here. For example, I have AZ1, AZ2, AZ3. Okay, so this is my one customer. For example, let's say Redbus. So they created a VPC and they kept AZ1A. So AZ1B, AZ1C. These are three availability zones, let's say in Mumbai region. Okay, so uh, so whenever let's say there is a Redbus customer, they want to move their servers to cloud. Let's say in Mumbai region, they need to establish in Mumbai region. But what happens if they can keep all the servers in one particular availability zone? For suppose they have their application in only one availability zone, so what is the issue there? So if they kept all the available servers in one availability zone, whenever there is a issue with this particular availability zone, their entire application may be down. So the general say is that never ever create a network which is only spread to one availability zones. So there should be minimum two availability zones in your network, so that to avoid the downtime. So I created a Redbus customer here, took at least two availability zones. So right, yeah, this is my Redbus customer. Yeah, this is my Redbus customer. Similarly, in Mumbai regions, Let's say IRCTC is another customer using the AWS cloud. So they can also create their network spreading to three different regions. Let's say they're spreading their network to three different regions. Let's say this is my IRCTC website. This website. So these are two customers using AWS cloud. So one customer is distributing their infrastructure in two availability zones, and another is distributing their network to three availability zones. Now, so whenever one of the availability zones is down, let's say my 1A availability zone 1A is down due to some technical issues or some maintenance activity, but the application is never going down because the application is available on another availability zone. So that is the main reason here we are spreading this infrastructure in multiple availability zones. And let's say, so our aim is to understand the VPC. So here this particular virtual boundary uh, between the customer to customer is provided by a concept called VPC. So let's say this is my VPC for red bus, and let's say this is my VPC. This is my VPC for IRCTC. So how they're going to differentiate? Generally, there is a VPC ID that could be generated, that will be generated. Each time a VPC is created, that will be unique. So that there will be no match. So whenever you have to your request, so whatever the application you are hosting, so whenever you configure the network in your AWS account, so all will be specific to this ID. So you will connect whenever the request comes to this VPC. So we have our VPC ID will be specific, and we can only connect to our VPC ID, not the other customers VPC ID. So this is how the virtual network will be differentiated. So this VPC is virtual because we cannot physically this is not a physical bit, this is a virtual boundary that will be separated from one customer to another, so that they will not allow they will not breach the security, I can say. So that is how this VPC is function. So let's say I created a VPC, so that spreads about two regions. So now what? So this VPC need to connect to the outside world. So this VPC need to connect to the outside world. That means internet, and this VPC also need to allow request from our network. That means red bus network. So that is how we need to configure the VPC. So let's say this is the VPC concept and availability zones distribution. So remember, VPC is a virtual boundary that will separate the customers, so that it will not a security breach, because I just took these two examples. So but in Mumbai data center, I mean Mumbai region in AWS, there will be thousands of, like, even in if you go for North Virginia, there will be lakhs of customers hosting their applications or hosting their architecture and infrastructure on AWS. So there should not be any security breach. So that is why we are using. That is why AWS is providing this um, virtual private cloud. So I didn't. So I mistakenly. Let's say this is my VPC. So I say, yeah, this is a typo. Okay. So let's go to the other concept. So now I know what is VPC. So VPC is a virtual boundary. So so every customer need to create their own VPC for within their account, so they can create multiple VPCs in their account. So when I say account, it is the AWS account which we create for the customer. So let's say Redbus needs to host their applications on cloud. So they will create an account in AWS, um, and they will create a VPC um, in their account. So let's say they want to host different uh, different environments, production, pre-prod, um, pre-prod and load test, something like that. So they can create VPCs for accounts. So for production, they can put all the production servers in one VPC, and they can put all the dev environments in one VPC. So so they can segregate like that. But we can, it is possible that we can put all our infrastructure in one VPC, but uh, again it have to be networking part, so where we segregate how many servers we need in each VPC before we are actually implementing our architecture. So let's say simply we have to create a server in one of the VPC, and we have to connect to that server from putty. That is our simple lab we are going to do. So for that we need to create one VPC, and inside that VPC we have to create subnets, right? So we have to create subnets. Yeah, we have to create subnets. These are my subnet 1 and subnet 2. Let's name them. This subnet 1, and this is my subnet 2. Okay, so these are my subnets. So again, so the concept will be similar. Again, we can host um, our app servers in one subnet, and we can host our databases in another subnet. So it's all depend upon how we are gonna we're gonna configure our network. So let's say okay, let us continue with our app. So we have to create a subnet. So inside that subnet we have to create an server instance, I mean. So this is my instance. Okay, this is a virtual machine, right? Yeah. So this is the architecture. So this is my region, Mumbai region, and inside my we need to select the region where we need to host our application, and then inside that region, so we have multiple availability zones. So each availability zone is a data center. So we will select the number of data centers we need. So it completely depends upon the risk we have to take. So if we say, if we create our application, create our infrastructure in three different availability zones, our application will be highly available. If it is two, it will be slightly decreased. If it is only one, there is a high chances our application is going to be down, right? So we selected our availability zones. Then we have to create a VPC within all the availability zones. So how to include the availability zones in VPC? We will be knowing when we are creating a VPC, right? So we will create a VPC which will provide cloud network. So inside that VPC we will create a subnets, right? So once we created the subnets, we can directly launch virtual machines into that subnet, right? Okay. So this architecture is similar to I can say on-prem. When we are hosting that VMware applications on VMware, we use a hypervisor. On the top of hypervisor we will launch a VMs. But here the hypervisor And here we it is also the same concept, but AWS uses a huge servers as a hypervisors. So backend, what happens? AWS also has hypervisors, and they will be giving a one of the VM on top of that hypervisor. So it is similar to on-prem, but cloud it is multiplied by 100 or 1,000 times. So this VM we are taking from the hypervisor provided by Amazon. So we will not configure the hypervisor, we will not take care of the hypervisor, we will not take care of the physical infrastructure, we will only take care of the VM. So this VM is hosted on hypervisor which is owned by AWS, right? And we will select the configuration of this VM by our own. So how much RAM we need, how much disk we need, and how much IOPS we need, like that. So we select the configurations of the VM, and based upon that configuration, Amazon will create our VM on uh, one of the hypervisor, which is, we cannot call it a hypervisor because it is very vast. um, so so it is very vast in size. So so cloud concept is little bit easier than compared to the on-prem, I believe, I guess. Okay, so let's stop here, so we can continue our lab in another session. So another session we gonna create uh, we're gonna create a VM, and we can connect that VM from putty. Here we are using as a public, as a beginner we will be using uh, in public network, that means Google. So from internet we will be connecting from internet to this particular VM, right? So uh, how to establish this connection we will be doing in the next lab, right? Okay, thank you.